IVM.
The journeys of global agencies are filled with an immense number of learnings for all of us to dig into, both from the choices they've made as an organization, as well as the work that has propelled them to succeed and grow. One such agency, whose journey I've always admired over the years, has been VML YNR. And I'm excited to have John Cook, their global CEO, on Advertising is Dead this week, to not just run through their journey, but also to get his perspective on being a global leader who's focused on building a modern agency network while keeping its essence and culture in place. That's what's ahead on this week's episode of Advertising is Dead. I'm Varun Tugirala, the co-founder and content chief at The Glitch. Right back with this.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're with John. John, thanks for taking the time out.
It's great to be here. I'm honored you asked. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I think the last time we met was when you were in India in March, and then a lot of things changed.
Yeah, it was. Neither of us knew that would be the last trip that I was taking for a while. Just like a normal week. We saw each other in Mumbai, Bombay. I still have my suitcase. I can see it across the room from that trip. Gosh, it seems, in some ways it just seems like yesterday. But that's been a long time. It was March, like you said.
And I hate to ask, okay, how have things been in this period? But I'd actually want to make that a little more broader to kind of kick things off. Say that, how have you seen the whole advertising and marketing space kind of evolve, right? If you look at the last couple of years and if you're looking ahead, what's been the largest change for you?
You kind of related to COVID-19, everything we're seeing this year, I think you mean. I think the change... First of all, I think it's weeding out who agencies that are built the right way on the right values and the right connectivity. I think there's so much fluff in our industry, and there's an overpopulation of agencies in our industry to some degree. Great ones and not so great ones. I don't mean to sound too Darwinistic about it, but I do feel like this year tends to really test the bones of your company, the structure of your company, the way you're built. Are you really in this business to be in this business? I've really, not enjoyed the pandemic, obviously, but I enjoy kind of the science of. I'm a big fan of agencies in general, and just watching, the ones that have the right bones are going to make it through this, and that's been important. You may not have known you were building your agency for these moments, but. Yeah. If you were doing the right things in terms of your business, your culture, your work, you're probably going to make it through.
So when you look at that part of it, if you're kind of looking ahead in that sense of the word, if you had to break down a few pieces and saying, okay, this is where things are really moving, both in terms of what brands are looking to do, how things have kind of changed, what would those be in your mind?
Yeah, I think... first, just unrelated to the pandemic, but I have been thinking a lot about just the future of our business. I've been thinking, when we merged VML and YNR together a couple of years ago, we got that opportunity to think about, rare opportunity to actually reinvent a company on the fly at scale. And to do that, we've had to think about the future. And I really, I think this is something that's in the years to come, the experience that one has between commerce, buying something, marketing something, being entertained by a brand, being informed by a brand. Right now, just on Instagram, I can see all those things coming together, and it feels to me really seamless. I'll all of a sudden find myself buying a shirt or something, and then I'm right back to being entertained, then I'm right back to informed, then I'm right back to my friends. That feeling, and that's just Instagram, that feeling multiplied by 1 billion, in the years to come, that blending of not knowing when I'm in each of those modes, that's been going on for years, but I think we're underestimating how fast that's going to blend together in the years to come. And as it relates to agencies, how are we going to prepare to be there as brands? How will they prepare for that world? It'll be good for some, bad for others.
Yeah. So for me, right, it's been interesting. I'm just adding on to what you're saying. It's been interesting because I didn't come from an advertising background, and for me, what's always been interesting about digital was the fact that you could kind of. It almost felt like, I think even like 5 years ago, felt like you were getting towards completing the loop where advertising always kind of put something out there, and then you would consume that, and in many cases, are you really pushing them to actually buying it or making sure they buy it? And that loop got complete. But what I also feel the push is really coming towards now is that I think that it's not only just closing the loop, but I think it's keeping you in that. I mean, it's almost like it's reeling you in constantly, and in a positive way, not necessarily in a negative way. And that for me has almost been the most exciting part. I mean, when you mentioned commerce, that's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, my daughter the other day had a good in that. We were talking about Disney World of all things. She was talking about how, the rides were kind of like brands and how you'd enter a ride, the rides are entertaining you before you get on the ride, like a brand does. Before you experience the brand, you're teasing it. Then you get in it and it's a magical experience and you're living the brand. And then you're in a gift shop and you can engage and buy that brand. And I think the metaphor really works, except for the fact, to your point, I think you're getting right after the gift shop, you're going right back into the ride. The loop isn't over, and that gift shop may start happening a little bit more while you're on the ride, so to speak, in the metaphor. To take your point of the loop, kind of comes circling right back around.
Yeah, and if you when you look at that, what I also find interesting is that so you started off in VML when you were 30 people strong.
Yeah, 1996, 30 people. A couple of them still at the company. So I didn't found VML, but I was definitely close right at the beginning there. Yeah, wow.
You were there from when there were 30 people, and now you're what, 7,000?
Yeah.
Over across all continents, almost like, if I don't count Antarctica. So.
Right. I don't know if you count that one or not, but yes, everywhere. It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's all happened pretty fast too, by the way. It just seems.
How has that been? I mean, if you go back to the early days to now, how has that journey kind of been for you? Because what I find interesting is because most times, so obviously we've gone from like 2 people to 300 at Glitch. So for me, it's interesting to hear that how that kind of moves ahead as you go along.
Yeah, it's weird. It feels like it's all pretty fast. Like it just feels like it's all on this magical script of how it's supposed to be. And I live in a little bit of a Pollyanna world that. I know that because I love the company so much that, but so I recognize that, but I do feel like some things have never changed in terms of the values and why you're in the business and the people that have been around, maybe not as long as me, but people who've been around a long time. If I look around, there are different types of people, but the common denominator of loving working with people that they love and loving the general world of technology and creativity. And you can see the people that don't care about people and the people don't care about the industry. They won't last. So I've enjoyed that.
You mentioned culture, right? So that's actually an interesting part because I feel that the agencies that really kind of grow and have people who stay with them for so long, they tend to be agencies which have something in their culture that kind of holds people in, right? And makes them want to stay longer and longer. So what's that kind of been? I mean, because whoever I've spoken with across, and I know that we've spoken in the past, and I've met multiple people from VML, not just from India, but across. I've noticed that everybody seems really happy to be a part of the agency. So, so what's the? I mean, without giving away any of the secret sauce, what's the secret sauce? Is what?
Oh, we start out. We have a very detailed hypnosis process we use when somebody joins the brainwash. Completely, and that they'll never leave. No. It doesn't sound like a bad idea, but no, it's it's pretty easy. I think it in general, it's different for everybody, but in general, the answer to your question is, we have worked really hard to make it a company that you can feel like you can make it the company you want to be in, and it's been that simple. It's changed through the years how that happens, but truthfully. People leave companies, and if you look at why they leave companies, there's a host of reasons: for more money, for a different industry, for a different, to get more digital, to get less digital, to change geography, whatever it might be. In advertising, people leave companies, and that's okay. But we've said, as long as we're here, let's take the things that you would leave the company for and put them into the company. So your first choice, if you want to stay, is to have that, and that would be a secret to once upon a time being an ad agency as VML and saying we need to get more digital. We didn't all go join a digital company. We said, let's just put that in,
Yeah.
And then we got almost too digital. We said, let's not leave the company. We were in Kansas City. Let's not leave Kansas. Let's make it national. Let's make it global. And when you look around and instead of hoping that those things happen to your company, realizing when you look around, you go, oh, we're in charge of this thing. We'd be remiss not to put into it the kind of things that allow us as friends to stay together. And that's coming from me, the CEO, but I would hope that feeling is in everybody in every role to some degree. And that's the secret to it all. That and the hypnosis.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick up that hypnosis point. I think
I got it.
That's how you're going to take in and do. You mentioned the fact that that at one point you got too digital, right? Now, I've seen a couple of cycles, at least when whoever I've spoken to about the last decade, and my focus has been a lot more about the last decade. I think that's seen the most amount of like drastic change. It's been the fact that you've had what were traditional creative agencies move a lot more towards digital capabilities slowly but surely. But you also had a lot of what were called digital shops, and I don't know why they were called digital shops and not just like digital agencies. You called digital shops who quickly moved towards being 360 agencies. I'm not going to go to the traditional one. I'm going to go to the digital one and saying, if you're a digital agency, how do you kind of make that shift towards moving towards doing things just beyond what is supposed to be your realm of where you can play?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the reason we got digital wasn't because we were massively digital people. The core reason we got really deep in digital and got ahead way back when, late 90s, was not to be digital, but because that was the best way to connect with the consumer at the time. And so I guess it goes back to that. And so we didn't become more 360 to become more 360. We did that because there was a greater way to connect with consumers. And so the reason we got more broad is the same reason we got more narrow. It's just we're just trying to stay relevant in terms of how you connect with people. And if digital and technology that happened to be the best way, we got really good at it. It would be the same thing if something else emerges. We will stay ahead of it. The number one thing is, how do we stay connected with somebody? How do we keep brands connected?
Yeah.
And if that happens to be technology, we will go. So I think that's probably different than a group of people who were of technology that started an agency, or film editors who started, and there's all those things are good. We came at it from that way. I think we were marketers first. Technology as a means to be better marketers, rather than technology people who learn to market. And so that's how it's the ebbs and flows have happened that way, probably more strategically than any other way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. I mean, would you say there were specific points and kind of choices that you guys made that really took you on that journey? If there were any which come to mind?
There were definitely choices and things. I remember when we were a marketing company. This is back in '98, and way more than you care about. But I remember the decision to add more technology and depth, and that word didn't even really exist in the advertising world. But a decision point, to be very specific, was the cost of that. Those people cost more. They were harder to find. They were harder to recruit to Kansas City, where we were from.
Yeah.
And you had to make, you know this from growing your business all these years, that you have to make decisions on investing things. It's not just having the idea that you need to be deep with technology. We had to specifically spend money and invest. And when you do that, you give up other things because there's only so much money. And I remember those decisions. That wasn't just me by any means. It was a lot of people. I can remember the same thing happened when I made the comment, we got too digital in the 2000s. What I meant by that was it was fairly easy money if you were a good digital shop to get big website, wins and projects. But you can see what happened was we were sacrificing, we were getting too project management-ish. We were losing strategic view. We were losing creativity, expression of brand. But same thing, I remember it was pretty easy to identify we needed to round ourselves back out. What was harder is, how do you make those investments, and how do you, as a business, what do you give up to gain something? I remember very specific points of decisions. Not to say everything was that planned out. I mean, we've had this philosophy. All of us that lead VML1 are, generally speaking, it's the biggest company every day it's a dollar bigger. It's the biggest company any of us have ever run. Every day it grows. And we didn't come flying in. WPP didn't come fly us in because the thing got big. Like, okay, now bring in the adults who know how to do this. This is the same people. And I love that because it means, we actually don't know what we're doing, which means we get to ask better questions. We get to ask dumb questions. We get to really think about the pace of things. And I think you and I have a lot of parallels in that, and same with your partners, which I love.
You make an interesting point also when you talk about scaling it out, because you decided to kind of stay in Kansas as headquarters, which is I wouldn't say it's an interesting choice, but I'd love to hear why that was a core part of because I've seen the tendency to say, oh, we're moving HQ to New York, or we're moving to London, or that's what I've always heard, and what I've always found interesting, because I remember the first time I met Tripti, she mentioned the Kansas City office, and she told me it is one of the coolest offices you'll ever see, because it's an old airport that's been converted into an office. And I remember that was the first story I heard about VML back. It's almost like 3-4 years ago, and I'd love to hear. I mean, obviously that keeps certain culture in there, but was that a conscious thing, or is it just like, guys, we've been here, it's great, why do we need to move?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, it is. First of all, it's a fantastic office, and I'm sure when she told you that, you're like, first of all, where's Kansas City?
No. We've all seen The Wizard of Oz, so we all know where Kansas is.
Exactly. And then we have a really good American football team that a lot of the world's seen lately, and which is cool in Kansas City. But no, it's not a conscious decision. In VML, we definitely was the headquarters, the biggest office. As we merged together VML Y&R, it wasn't the biggest Y&R office. That was probably New York. But it's weird because you're asking me. We're kind of in a transition of not trying to have it be called the headquarters as much as I have this view that I'm not sure we can pull off. It's not just my view, but that it's a headquarterless company. Which is a challenge, because we have some really offices that are really big and have big scale, so he naturally becomes headquarters-ish, or if a CEO is there, or your chief creative officer, or whatever it might be. Yeah. But I would like to move away from it. I say I, because I'm answering the question, but it's kind of a we. Could headquarters just become a concept, or could the middle of a company, the center, not be a place, but and that will take some time, because you do have some offices that are bigger for us. And I always hate in VML Y&R if somebody, feels disconnected or smaller than the center of Kansas City or New York, because being a WPP agency where, so much happens in New York and London, you as a smaller city get tired of being off center, and feeling like you're not in center. So if we could create a center as a philosophy, more than a physicality, I would love it. We're far from that though, because we have, big offices. And by the way, one of our biggest offices after New York and Kansas City is Shanghai. There's almost as many people there as there are in Kansas City or New York for us, which is interesting.
I also asked that question because what I've always found fascinating, and I don't think that, at least in my mind, I've ever been able to figure out how, is that when you have multiple units across the world, or even across the country, which is our case, how do you kind of manage as a leader, but also kind of manage to have a set of leaders who kind of also, to have all of them believe in a singular philosophy, but yet be able to do their own thing and kind of stay within that. How does that work with you? How do you kind of manage that part?
Yeah, huge. This is the easy answer too. It's a huge level of trust. The hardest but most important thing that you can do as a leader is make sure you have other great leaders in place. And I think of myself as a really good leader, but I know that I am because of the amount of leaders that we have around each other. And everything in the entire world of our agency falls off of having good leaders. It does not work, and so that doesn't magically happen though. You have to kind of find those people. You have to build trust together, recognize that, and we've done that. I think then when you have great leaders, the worst thing you can do is if you have these amazing talented creatures that we all are, to put them in cages and put them all in the same uniform. Kind of like this metaphor that VMLY&R and the advertising industry is the internet.
Yeah.
But as leaders, we're all going to work from the same browser. So we may all work from Safari or Chrome, but whatever the browser we have as leadership means there's certain tendencies of that browser. There's certain operating principles of the browser.
Yeah.
What the browser does is it allows you as a leader to go into that world and explore that internet, if you will, in the metaphor, as you see fit. And I would hate it if my internet experience was just somebody dictating it, and so we like to say, as a leader, if you got somebody good enough to be a leader of a country, of a city, of a department, that means you've got somebody who has no interest in being told what to do. You've got somebody stubborn enough, with enough ego, enough positivity, enough energy. You've got to, and I know how I like to roll, and that's how it be, let me be me. I've got to, and we've got to let our leaders be that way. And that is the secret. Long answer, secret to your question of how do you create connectivity with scale?
Yeah. And how do you get all of them to kind of work together as well? That might also be tricky because I want to get to some of the work which we obviously before this I mentioned you I wanted to see some work, and you sent me some of the recent pieces, of which I've actually seen a couple of them already, which is good. Which means I saw them by virtue of it being shared. Because every single country has its own cultural nuances. Both from the way people work and kind of work they create. But you have to kind of make sure that leadership across the board still has, it still needs to work in a way that you feel like you're part of a whole, right? And that always is tricky. I know that's something which we battle with many times, and then trying to figure out how to make sure that even people within a city kind of work together. You have a much tougher task of making people across the world work together. So how do you balance that part?
Yeah, we put a premium on meetings, not on meetings for meeting's sake, but we are pretty religious about, at a global and a national, at a local level, staying very connected as leadership teams and making those meetings interesting and letting people have the spotlight and getting to know one another. We do a lot of that in person, and I think we've even done more of it since COVID. In terms of that, we just had a meeting with 140 top leaders a week ago called the year's half full meeting, and it was kind of a fun play on the optimism of half full, but the year's half full, and it's gone pretty well. Anyway, we had in an hour and a half, 90 minutes, we had 45 people present, and all under 90 minutes at about 35 different segments of all on the same theme, but all expressing their own way. We stay really united in terms of seeing each other to do what you're saying, which is to keep a certain connectivity, a certain consistency to how we are and who we are. And so that's been good.
Yeah. I was talking about the work a little earlier, and what I found interesting, the Viagra film, for me was, I remember it was shared by someone online, and I had seen it, and for me, what was so interesting is, so I've been a huge propagator of using animation for the longest time. I think COVID has done more to push the animation industry in advertising forward than anything else, but there was a specific nuance to it, right? And I looked at that piece, and you mentioned a little earlier, you spoke about experiences. So the bringing culture and experiences together in that sense, would you say that that's really the core of how you function as a creative organization? Would that be the right way to put it?
I think it's. I think that piece. You're talking about the piece for Viagra. We should put the link out there to the work, along with the way with this podcast. Yeah. But I think it's to me, I love everything about it because, and I think it does start to be a microcosm of the type of work we want to do. It's telling a story that has true human connectivity in it, true, real human emotion of the way this couple is navigating life together and starting to drift apart a little bit because of the normal things that happen in our life, like work and and the story. The thing I like about two things. One is, first of all, in that category, Viagra, where everything looks exactly the same. Yeah. You and I could write the typical Viagra ad right now. Yeah. But the team didn't. They did something different. They tapped a deeper emotion between couples, and I love that. But I like that in about less than 2 minutes what that film is,
Yeah.
I feel like I know those characters and I know everything they're going through.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have empathy for both of them. And then
it's so relatable in that sense.
Yeah. And so, that's, if our job is to connect consumers with brands, I think it does that in a really good way.
What stood out for me is when I look at the entire story about just a couple together and what kind of brings them together and kind of pulls them apart as well. In most real cases, while I think what you mentioned as a typical Viagra piece that you would come up with would be the most obvious one. It would be the caricaturish one. It would be, I mean, people are going tongue in cheek. People are going in all those zones. But for me, this would almost be, it's just from an inside standpoint, it is genuinely why someone would actually need it. And yet connect to everybody in that sense. And so that's actually what I kind of got out of that the first time I saw it.
Well, I think the other thing, so you're speaking very well to the emotional connectivity. And you also mentioned animation and the future of not here to say that everything in the future will be animation by any means, but I do think there's animation for animation's sake, and that can be fine. But animation, that piece, if you see the piece, animation allowed for very key parts of the message to come through in shorthand. Animation allows the bed that they're sleeping in together to stretch out to proportions you could never show in film, to metaphorically show how they're drifting. And you could never afford to do that. And so animation plays a role in telling the story. It's not just there because it looks cool or it's attention grabbing, which it is. And by the way, while we're on that topic, the music of that piece is the same thing. It speaks to the power of music, taking a song that people know, but giving a whole new emotion to that particular song. Animation, music, and storytelling coming together. I think it's a good example of all those, how important those things are.
So when a piece like that is built out, right, and most times, so I was recently talking to, I was doing so there's a batch of students going in to study communication, and I was doing their first piece before they kind of enter college, and I was telling them that I said, don't lose what would generally affect you as consumers, and don't forget those emotions. Don't get too caught up in those pieces. But what I was also kind of telling them is the fact that use data and use insights not as something that is shoved towards you, but really it's the best thing you can get. Because and I'd love to hear this from you, is that when I saw this film, I also understood that there was also deep insight from a data standpoint. Right? I'm sure there was something there. So is that generally a cycle which is across the organization, saying let's use data for an insight piece and not necessarily to just kind of sell what you want to sell?
It's absolutely, and it's part of our process, and the part of it's a priority to use data. The priority that you saw in action is also very important, which is use data like crazy, use insight like crazy. But when you see the final piece, don't make it look like there was an ounce of data used. It's you would never, because I hate when you go to the award shows and they show you the stuff that's the best use of data. I love the ones that you don't see. The biggest award winners in any use of data are the ones that you really have no idea there was data. That's what I love about the piece. Most people wouldn't even think the word data. You and I do, because we know the background. But that is the best use of data, is when you can't see it at all. Same with technology, by the way, sometimes.
There is one thing which a lot of people don't know, but I remember from our last conversation, is that you are a huge Star Wars fan. And I remember the last chat that we had was about the fact that you had been to Star Wars Land, and I was like, I really want to make a trip. And since then, none of us will be able to make any trips. Would you say, if you had to say, what is the force that helps bind an agency together, what would that force be? If looking ahead, how do you keep the force alive for the agency world? Because all I've heard many people put down, and I think that's gone down a little bit, is saying that the agency space is dying, and and I don't agree with that. I think it's the best time to be in an agency is the way I look at it. But what's the force that's according to you, is keeping it going, and where is it really headed in that sense?
Well, first of all, I thought, the Star Wars Land's called Galaxy's Edge, and it's fantastic. I got to see that right before the pandemic. I think it's technically open now, but I can't imagine what it's like. But it's amazing. I could go on for that forever. But if to answer your question, you have to
and I want to then ask you a little bit about how that is as well, because
yeah, we'll get to that.
I want to digress to that a little bit.
But I think you have to kind of reverse engineer what the force is, and the force is that balance between the darkness and the light, and that's so. People say the force, and you really have to think about that balance. So when you ask it and put it to an agency metaphor, I think it's a very good question, but I think the light or the force that drives it, kind of is the power of an idea, and the fact that you can never in our world replace an idea or the creativity of a human idea, and that is the light that will live on. Just like they try to squash the Jedi, but you just can't, because there's a force of light that cannot be extinguished with the Jedi, and I think that is the power of a creative idea, and a creative idea meaning could be technology, could be storytelling. The darkness, darkness, lots of darkness is that's fighting against that. I think honestly, sometimes it's the amount of proliferation of technology and tools and media that we have, because I think that people can find their way to that being the most important thing. It's a huge distraction in our industry when you lose the light. You lose the light is the idea. And I think that's what's working against it. It's sometimes it's not even evil. It's just the proliferation of all the technology you could use, and people checking the boxes of having to use that or use every medium. Yeah. We have to fight against that and get back to the idea. And I'm glad there's some Jedi of us still out there fighting for that. You included.
Yeah. Although very weirdly, because my daughter's name is Leia, I have to explain to people that makes me Vader. So then I'll have to figure out which side I'm on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you didn't think about the metaphor when you're naming her that.
I didn't think about that at all. So okay, one second. I'm going to definitely ask, how is Galaxy's Edge? So since many of us who will listen to this right now can't make that trip there, even if we want to for the foreseeable future, give us a little bit of an insight into because I know there are a bunch of people who listen to this who also are Star Wars fans. We're going to do a bit of a digression here and get you to talk about that a little bit.
Those who aren't Star Wars nerds can fast forward through this part, but I can go on for a long time. In short, as somebody who loves Star Wars and loves Disney, my expectations were extremely high. The cool thing was they massively exceeded already high expectations, and the way that they did that was the amount of detail. You walk in there. First of all, it's in the Hollywood Studios part of this, so it's not its own theme park. It's a part of a theme park, and I think people may not realize that, but they do a fantastic job of when you leave one part of the theme park and go into the Galaxy's Edge, you're completely immersed, and they've put giant rocks and mountains at every sight line, so you can't see anything outside of that, and you literally feel like you're in this spaceport. Secondly, right in the middle is a Millennium Falcon, and every detail and then the way you wait for some of the rides is under the Millennium Falcon, so you get to see every detail. When you've been watching those movies for years and you see all those little parts and machinery, you wonder what it is. You can reach out, see it, touch it, and every detail of that, exactly how that works. And you get on while you're waiting for line. You're walking right back past Chewbacca's holographic chess set. You're walking right by where somebody laid down and took a nap, or where Luke was fighting that drone thing, with his helmet. It's all the detail is what's amazing, and that's before you get on a ride. I could go on about the rides, but they had me at waiting in line, and instead of people walking around, there's stormtroopers walking around, checking your passports. It's pretty awesome. You got to go.
So I wanted to make sure I go there before I turn 40. I turn 38.
Okay,
in a couple of days. So I still have 2 years to make it there. So
I hope the world's good enough for by then.
Was advertising what you wanted to do when you started off? I did notice when I skimmed through your LinkedIn that you started journalism.
Yeah, I was journalism, but it's kind of a fake because not fake journalism, but in my journalism school, it was the advertising program. We were like the dumb ad kids down the hall from the real journalists. But
okay.
No, I'm kidding. It was journalism school. I went to the University of Missouri in the U.S. and it was a great journalism school, and they were forward thinking enough to have a strategic communications advertising program. At that time, it was a pretty big deal and pretty novel in 89, 90, 91, whatever that was. And so but to answer your question, first of all, the thing I love about this agency and our industry is it's made up of very few people who actually wanted to be an advertiser. I love that. But it's software engineers and comedians and writers and artists. But I am somebody who did want to be. I'm kind of living the dream I wanted to have, which is to be at an agency, not just in advertising, but at an agency, which is always really glamorous to me. And I always wanted to do that. So yeah, I'm living what I wanted to do.
You're one of the first people who said this to me in 89 episodes. You're one of the first people who said, okay, started off, okay, I wanted to do some of these things, but would I really think I would be doing this today when I started off?
Right.
But you kind of wanted to do this.
I used to be the answer used to be you'd say that and everybody was in advertising because they were in advertising. Now that's the cool thing is I'm a unicorn who actually wanted to be in it. I know you didn't start out wanting to be an you're in the industry.
I still don't realize sometimes that I'm in advertising. Like I stumbled into it. I've had zero. So thankfully for me, Rohit wanted to be in advertising, but he wanted to make advertising films. I was happy making reality TV till like 2009. So that was great.
I think it's really healthy that the industry needs people like you that don't think they're in it and don't even want to admit it. I think it's actually kind of healthy. It'll keep that's a freshness we need.
Which is why the name of this podcast gets called out a lot whenever when I mention this part. Is this why your podcast is named this? I'm like, no, that's because everything.
Yeah, I realized that as the answer to the question is, am I dead if I say that? If I say that I wanted to be an advertiser, Yeah, I like the name of the podcast. I get it. I'm with you on that.
If you had to kind of turn around and a large number of people listen to this podcast are young, right? They're students, they're just started communication school, just studying somewhere, or have just started their careers. If you had to kind of turn to them and say, these are the few things you need to keep in mind because for you to kind of grow and enjoy this entire industry, what would those things be?
Yeah, I was given a talk the other day. We have a set of interns, kind of virtual internship program. But one of the things that I was talking about that I think is really important that is this idea of, and this advice could be helpful in a lot of industries, but the idea of being able to see the movie that you want to make and then go make it. Mm-hmm. The idea that if you can see the finished product, you can visualize the experience you want somebody to have with a brand or somebody to have with your agency or somebody to have with your work. Mm. You could kind of just daydream about how would you want somebody to react to that and just go crazy thinking about we all have an imagination. Just think about jump right to what experience you'd want somebody to have with your brand or with your agency. And then the cool thing about this business is that every tool is available to you to reverse engineer and make that experience that you want somebody to have happen. And not every business can say it that way. Yeah. And so I would encourage people who are really, especially getting in the business, to just, if you're attracted to this business, that means you're attracted to imagination and you're attracted to experiences. And I think the business will tend to, especially as you get into it, when jobs are so segmented and specific and roles are a little more pedestrian in some cases, it could start to teach you accidentally that you have to put all the pieces together to get to the big thing at the end.
Yeah.
But break down those walls, see the movie you want to happen, and then just make the list of, okay, it's as easy as then what pieces have to come together for this? And every person, skill, technology, and thing is available to you.
Yeah.
To do that. And what will happen is you'll start stringing those things together to make your ideas come to life. Next thing you know, you'll be really good at your job, or you'll have built an agency accidentally, or it doesn't matter. But let's say you had a big meeting coming up, no matter how old or young or new or you were, visualize the meeting you'd like to have if you were listening to it, and would you really want to see 100 slides? No. But we tend to make 100 slides. The movie I'd want to see is a presentation that was funny, that made me cry, that had surprises, that had expected things, that had outcomes. I would just think about the meeting I wanted somebody to have if I was going to hold a meeting, and just reverse engineer back to it, and then assign those things and create those things. And you could take that metaphor as big as you wanted or as small as what you're doing tomorrow. And I think that's something I would offer to people who are thinking about it. I love to talk about it and and go on about that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think what you said about the 100 slides and what you want people to experience is so true, because that's one of the things I've always tried to say is that don't fall into that pond and not get out of it, because the day you get stuck in that loop of just being in that echo chamber, you're just going to be like you're just going to be preaching to a small set and not necessarily what somebody might want to hear, which is why I always say that try to use as less jargon as possible in advertising, because the more jargon you tend to use, the more you alienate people. So I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think about as human beings, you think back about meetings and you don't really remember anything from it. You remember the experiences, you remember the impression that human beings left on you. You would say, oh, I saw this meeting 5 years ago and this person was just magical. And you're like, I don't remember exactly what they said. I just remember it was different. And that's just with meetings. I mean, there's lots of ways to take the advice, but especially on slides, it happens all the time. But have you ever been in a presentation in your entire life where a deck was being shown, ever in your entire life, where you wish they would have stayed on a slide longer? It's never happened.
That's true.
That is never a slide where you go, gosh, I wish they just went too fast. I wish they would go back to that slide for a while. It just never happens. And so why do we hang on slides for so long? I don't know. People are ready to move on. Keep the pace. Anyway, I'm getting deep into presentation stuff, but sorry.
No, but it's so true. What you said is right. I've never felt that ever in my life. Towards the end, as we start winding up every episode, I do this segment called what I like to call the humans of advertising, right? Which is me asking not extremely random, but mildly random questions. If you had to tell people that there was something that you really enjoyed doing, which is not something they would be surprised to know that, or be like, really, that's something you're into, and obviously I've made you talk about Star Wars, so the Star Wars is out of it. So beyond that, what would that be? What do you enjoy doing? What do you like consuming? Or it could be anything that generally obsess over, which people might say, really, that's something you're into. What would that be?
Yeah. I have lots of things that people would assume that humans are into, like hiking and watching sports and playing piano and all sorts of things that you would go, okay, that sounds pretty normal. The things you wouldn't expect, that are really weird about me, like I could sit there at midnight when I try to go to bed and just get on YouTube or something and go deep into like cooking videos or, weird stuff, like just the way that YouTube can take you in their algorithm and all these places. And I could do that for hours, and I wake up and I'm like, why am I tired? Oh, it's because I wasted 2 hours watching, but I think people would say, oh, you're the CEO of a company. Every minute must be massively productive and structured. It's like, no, I just like everybody else, I would like randomly watch the most random stuff on YouTube, in the middle of the night. And it's a weird answer to your question, but it's like, it's just, and the stuff is just all over the place. It gets from entertainment to cooking to, some woodworking video. I've never even worked with wood, but I'd be watching a woodworking or taxidermy. I've never done taxidermy. I watched how to stuff a bear the other night. It was like, whoa, what am I doing?
I saw a video of you, which you sent me, where you were cutting lots of wood. So you're definitely, if you're not into that, I don't know what you were doing.
I do. You saw a video of me using my chainsaw, which is like a massive tool that I love. There's no better way to relieve stress than just chopping wood. I love doing that.
What can you put together in an instant?
Wait, say that again?
What can you put together in an instant?
Oh, I could put together. I have a pretty quick to an idea in terms of how something would come together. Like a presentation or an idea, something like that. I could put that together quickly. If that's what you mean. I don't know. Maybe you mean like.
So this is the most open-ended question I asked, right? And I've always gotten very interested. So a lot of people tend to go towards food or drink, but on and off, I get what you said. So, if you had to recommend a bunch of things that you've read recently, you maybe watched, listened to on a podcast, any recommendations of that sort?
Yeah, I've been. I'm in between reading and binging Netflix and TV shows and all that. I'm really liking podcasts. I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, but one that I've been listening to a podcast called Origins. And I've really enjoyed that podcast. You can look it up, but it'll be a 4, 5, 6 episode series diving deep into the history of something in pop culture, like the history of Saturday Night Live, or the history of The Sopranos, or so. It's not always entertainment. It's really good. It goes deep, but it provides interviews, and it's a 6 or 7 point series every time they dive deep into stuff. I love it. Called Origins.
And why will advertising not die?
Yeah. It's back to the. It's a good way to wrap in terms of the force. That light side of the force always wins out. The idea, the creativity. I can't imagine a world where that will not be important, not be valued, not be at a premium, and people will gravitate to it. It'll never die because of that.
Thank you so much for doing this, John.
May the force be with you on that note.
May the force be with you too. Thanks, Arun, for doing this. It's been great, and thanks for taking out the time. And hopefully, it won't be that far away. We can catch up again, and maybe when I do make that trip to Galaxy's Edge,
I want to be there with you, or at least give you tips. Anyway, thanks for having me. I was looking forward to this. It's really good to talk to you. I probably won't see you soon in person, but let's talk. Let's catch up soon.
For sure.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So it's been a really, really fun week this week. We've had a great episode with Anand Nilakantha on Cyrus Says. Anand was one of the writers of Bahubali, and it's done some really, really fun stuff since that. Ashish Vidyarthi also had a really good episode on his show, Begin the Journey. Please do check that out. You do know Yuddha is back, right? Definitely check it out if you haven't. Yuddha is our show about Indian ancient warfare. It's hosted by Anirudh Kanisetti and Aditya Ramanathan. Really, really great show. You should check that out for sure. And I forgot. Rishikesh was on the network as well. He was on Absolutely Right with Aditi Surana. Do definitely check that out. With that, hope to see you next week.
This is the amazing story of something awesome. Once, Chuck decided to start a podcast. And so he did. The end. Okay, that was a crappy story. But I've got some really cool stories over at my new show, The Origin of Things. On this podcast, I look at the stories of how brands came into being and sometimes evolved out of quite unexpected circumstances. And to make it really fun, I reveal the name of the brand and sometimes a category only at the very end. The show is 5 to 7 minutes per episode and perfect for trivia junkies and brand nerds, especially those with short attention spans. New episodes out every Wednesday on IVM Podcasts app or website, or any podcast app or site that you happen to prefer. End of story, they lived happily ever after.
Look! Up in the internet! It's a meme! No! It's a cat video! No! It's the Geek Fruit Podcast!
That's right, we interrupt this riveting broadcast to tell you about our show, The Geek Fruit Podcast, where Tejas, Dinkar and I, Jishnu, talk about everything in pop culture, including DC, Marvel, Star Wars, Netflix, and everything in between.
You know how your friends hate it when you ramble about some nerdy crap and you just want somebody to listen to you? Well, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that, but come listen to us ramble and it'll almost be like the real thing. Kind of.
Listen to new episodes of the Geek Fruit Podcast every Monday and the Geek Fruit Bulletin every Thursday on iTunes, Google Podcasts, the IVM app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Happy listening, you nerds.